Good Tuesday morning. This is an interesting text today. I'll show you. Some Pharisees and Herodians were sent to Jesus to ensnare him in speech. They came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you're a truthful man and that you are not concerned with anyone's opinions. You do not regard a person's status, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth." So they're setting them up, okay? Is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or should we not pay? Knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, "Why are you testing me? What's the matter with you? Bring me a denarius to look at." They brought one to him, and he said to them, "Whose image and inscription is this?" They said, "Caesar's." Good. So Jesus said to them, "Then repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." They were utterly amazed at him. No kidding. That's a very famous line. That's an extraordinarily important line. And I'll tell you why, for whatever it's worth to you. It distinguishes between political power and religious authority, religious life. It doesn't fuse the two together. In the ancient world, it did. These guys were not wrong in the question they threw at Christ, because the legitimacy of governance came through religion. And for them to pay the temple tax to Caesar, okay, to give to Caesar, okay, would have been betrayal, apostasy. It would be to acknowledge the legitimacy of the Roman emperor. See, this is tricky stuff. These guys were not slouches. They were raising really serious questions, the Pharisees and Herodians. I'm taken away from them. They're not the bad guys. They are playing rough in the sandbox, but they had a legitimate reason to do so, because there was a real conflict. In the case, do these people, do they owe allegiance to Rome, pay the temple tax? Do they pay the tax? Is that what they call it? Not the temple tax, the census tax. What's the matter with me? The census tax, okay? See, because they are both Roman citizens and Jews. Can you be both? Can you be both? The modern state makes it clear, because in our time, we don't suffer that problem, because our constitutionality, our governments are not based upon religion, but on constitutions to which we agree to. Our forefathers did, but we ratify it in our elections, we ratify in our policies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We govern ourselves. We are governed by ourselves through the constitutional law, you see, and by voting, not because of religion. Hence, that's why a country like America can enjoy such a diversity of religions, because religion is not the basis of our citizenship, but rather allegiance to the Constitution, you see, which fortunately in America, the stroke of genius of Thomas Jefferson is religious freedom. So I have Muslim neighbors right 20 yards away from me, right next door. 20 yards meaning 20 measured yards. 1 yard if you look in the grass, okay? They're wonderful people. They're Bosnian Muslims. See? So in America, only in America can you have Muslims, Jews, Christians, all mixed in the same buildings and everything else, and not be at war with each other, but governed by the civil laws, you see? And therefore, given that structure, room for charity and affection. God, I love my neighbors. See? They like my dog, too. They like Lily. When little Jacob was just a little runt, he used to try to play with Lil. When Lily was a pup, 5 years ago. He was just about 7, 8 years old, whatever. If that. Maybe he was 4 or 5. I don't remember. Anyway, you see, because there's a distinction, and our founding fathers saw the need to distinguish radically, legally, the political constitutional order from the religious order of things, the religious modes. Okay? They themselves were probably agnostic and atheists, but they saw the role of religion internally, but not as forming the basis of the Constitution's legitimacy. The legitimacy of the Constitution comes from the consent of the governed. See? The American Constitution is one of the greatest examples of political genius maybe ever conceived, because it sprung itself free of religious bias and allowed for true freedom, a constitutional freedom, sanctioned not by religion, but by law. By law. That's extremely important. I'm glad I'm an American because I'm free to be a Christian, a Catholic, whose neighbors are Muslims and Jews, atheists. This is a marvelous place of diversity in unity. The unity of the Constitution as members of the society of America, as citizens of the United States, under the Constitution, governed by the rule of law, free to express our values and faith in any mode we choose. We can't impose on others, that's the key, but we can worship with our hearts and souls, free of oppression, free of government bias, etc. It's simply true. Our founding fathers were geniuses. They truly were geniuses. They saw the difference between Caesar and Christ, and they accord respect for both. No, it's fundamentally true. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. We are members of society, and as members of society, we support the laws of society. We support the well-being of the nation. At the same time, we believe from our hearts and our souls in the freedom of religion. I go to the Catholic Church. My neighbors go to the mosque. My Jewish colleagues go to the synagogue. And some go nowhere. They don't go to any church. We are equal citizens under the law, respectful of our diversity, actually honor it, because as such we are a rich nation of multiple experiences under the governance of the Constitution and the legitimacy of government. At the same time, we confirm that government every time we vote. We have a sacred obligation every 2 to 4 years, whenever an election comes, we have a moral and I think a civic obligation to vote, because we are the ruled and the rulers. See? At the same time, I believe we have a profound obligation to worship the divine, not the state, the divine, in our own mode of faith, to bring our hearts before the Godhead and to worship. To worship God, yes. Because God is a transcendent being that gave us life and redemption. Creation, life, and redemption. Therefore, we bend the knee to God, not out of servitude, but out of gratitude for the life we have been given. And I feel that so strongly. I am so grateful to God for my life, my family, my vocation, my life. I have lived a marvelous life beyond my wildest imagination. And I think the reason is because God called me to it. Who would have believed 60 years ago, 65 years ago, when I was just a boy, that I would have had the enormously rich life and the adventure that I've had? It's God's calling, the order, the passionate. I mean that. So I worship God with gratitude beyond words and thankfulness. God has been so good to me.